Ah, the space shuttle. Wait, is this the Bur... Soviet reusable spacecraft have a history going back to the 1950s. First, there was the Buria, Storm in Russian, a supersonic ramjet cruise missile that would drop a nuclear weapon on the US. It was cancelled in favor of simpler ICBMs. In the early 1970s, Soviet officials were concerned about the new space shuttle program of the US. The US said that the space shuttle was for peace, but the reaction of the Soviet officials was not pure paranoia. The shuttle was promised to have 60 launches a year. It's for my video. But NASA did not have plans for anything that needed 60 launches a year. The Soviets also saw that the shuttle would be just as expensive as conventional rockets. It looked like the shuttle was a military craft. It could launch lasers into orbit, catch satellites, and most frightening of all, it could hit Soviet cities with nuclear weapons faster than anything else. In my opinion, this was not the silliest thought of the Cold War. For example, Project 1794. Yes, this was real and it sort of flew. In 1976, official approval was given for the parallel development of the Buran, Blizzard in Russian, and the Energia, Energy in Russian, super heavy lift rocket. Initial wind tunnel tests showed that the space shuttle shape was ideal, but there was reluctance to build a very similar looking craft for obvious reasons. The Design Bureau OKB-1, Experience Design Bureau 1, first proposed two designs for the spacecraft. The MTKVP, Reusable Vertical Landing Transport Craft, a lifting body spacecraft that would be launched on top of a stack of boosters. It would land vertically under parachutes and would deploy retro rockets to slow it down before it hit the ground. It would need very little paved surface, which meant it could land in most of the Soviet Union. OKB-1 head Valentin Glushko wanted his Zvezda moon base, so he wanted a big booster that could be used for moon missions. The Millennia Scientific Production Association proposed its spiral design. This was a small lifting body that would be carried to high altitude by a hypersonic aircraft. It would then fire its rockets to get into orbit. Development had stopped and it was resumed. A prototype called the MiG-105 performed 8 test flights. The first Bohr test vehicles were also spiral prototypes and were launched from rockets and then re-entered the atmosphere. One was used to test the heat shielding for the Buran. The other one was the OS-120, Orbital Spacecraft 120 tons. It would be a close copy of the space shuttle with engines on the back. A compromise was achieved with the OK-92 orbital ship 92 tons. The Energia was started with a Vulcan, which would have powered the MTKVP. After the massive failure of the Soviet moon rocket, the N-1, a new heavy rocket was needed for the Soviet moon dreams. By 1980, the construction of the Buran was started. By 1983, the Bohr-5 test craft, which was a 1/8 scale replica of the Buran, was flying. It was put into suborbital trajectories by a Cosmos 3 rocket. 5 more were performed later. Another test vehicle, the OKGLI, which was also known as the Buran or Aerodynamic Analog, was built with 4 jet engines. It performed 25 test flights between 1985 and 1988. It would take off under its own power from the ground and then turn off its engines at a certain point and glide back to Earth. Also, by the time the OKGLI was flying, a less flattering example of Soviet engineering was given to the world, the RBMK. Why can't you just build a half-decent nuclear reactor? Leonid Brezhnev, under whose leadership the program was started, was now dead and had been succeeded by Mikhail Gorbachev. The site at Baikonur Cosmodrome where the Buran was launched from, Site 110, was reused from the N-1 moon rocket. Site 251 was a 4,900-yard-long runway for landings. Parts were transported on top of a modified Miezachev M4 bomber called the VM-4. The largest plane in the world was also built to carry the Buran, the AN-225. On May 15, 1987, the Energia was launched with Apoleus, a science satellite also built to shoot down Strategic Defense Initiative space lasers. The Energia functioned perfectly, but the Apoleus failed to reach orbit due to a computer error and burned up over the Pacific. At 6 a.m. Moscow time, November 15, 1988, the Buran-Energia lifted off from pad 110/37. No crew were on board. At 6:08, the Energia and Buran separate at an altitude of 150 kilometers. The Buran soon comes into a 250 to 260 kilometer altitude orbit. It orbits the Earth 2 times and comes in for a landing. It unexpectedly decides to loop to the right, not the left, and it lands perfectly. Another shuttle, the Pichtka, Little Bird, was almost complete. More flights were planned by the 1990s. But the Soviet Union had much bigger problems. The program was rightfully criticized. The Soviets had seen that the shuttle only made sense for military purposes, and so did the Buran. In 1993, the program was officially cancelled. Both the Buran and the Pichtka were put in hangars in Baikonur. In 2002, the roof collapsed on the Buran, destroying it. The Pichtka is still in a hangar.